Okay, well, in that case, let's go ahead and go live. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're talking about quantum education and the QuSTEAM initiative. I'm joined by Russell Ceballos, who is the Director of Innovation at QuSTEAM, and also the Associate Director of Curriculum and Education Partnership at the Chicago Quantum Exchange, as well as a lot of great experience teaching students about quantum information sciences. We're also joined by Bennet Brown, who is the Executive Director of the QuSTEAM initiative. And so I'll turn it over to them briefly. So the format today is that they'll talk a little bit about an overview of a lot of these initiatives and programs, and then we'll talk more generally in conversation about quantum education, some of the challenges there, and the role that both the Chicago Quantum Exchange and QuSTEAM play in addressing some of these challenges. So without further ado, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Absolutely. I am, as John had mentioned, Russell Ceballos. I am at the Chicago Quantum Exchange, which you can see on my background and hopefully here on my sharing the screen. Is it, there we go. Is it?
Looks good on my end.
All right. So the Chicago Quantum Exchange is a hub for advancing the science and engineering of quantum information, and we have a pillar for education and workforce development. Our organization really is a consortia spanning, as you see here, the University of Chicago, Argonne National Lab, Fermi National Lab, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Northwestern University, and we have the Ohio State University as a regional partner, and a lot of corporate partners. And so we are trying to really build the ecosystem here in Chicago and provide direction nationally and internationally for how to build the most inclusive and the most competitive workforce in quantum information science and engineering. As we know, this is going to be, I think, the linchpin of the technology itself. It's really rests on the people who do it and who will be doing it, and bring everyone to the table as early as we can is, I think, the best way forward. And that's our focus here in that way. And my charge. I am, as I mentioned, the Associate Director of Curriculum Education Partnerships at the Chicago Quantum Exchange. I'm also the Director of Programs Innovation at QuSTEAM, which was a grant that we were able to take and spin up out of the National Science Foundation's Convergence Accelerator program. I went to Southern Illinois University Carbondale, studied with Dr. Mark Bird and Dr. Eric Tombar, and it was really, really wonderful learning from them, as well as in my math advisor was Dr. Jerzy Kochik. And I don't have a traditional background, really, is the main thing. I started off in interdisciplinary studies looking at brain and quantum chemistry and molecular dynamics. It's a long, winding path, but at the end of the day, I ended up getting my PhD in the theory, working in the theory of open quantum systems. And along the way, I've done a lot of different types of work in quantum biology and unique types of materials. And so, yeah, I try to bring an interdisciplinary approach to everything that I do, and most especially education. And so I'll give it over to Bennet. And actually, give me one more second. I wanted to share the opportunities we have here at the Chicago Quantum Exchange are many and plentiful and span a great many different tiers or levels or entry points to quantum. One of which is one of these professional programs in a 4-day intensive course. This is the first one we provided and started. And then there's now an 8-week quantum science networking communications course. These are really wonderful opportunities to get a certificate and get some training, especially for those coming into the field from an industry field already established person field. We have the Open Quantum Initiative that I'm very intimately engaged with, and these students are just absolutely amazing. This is primarily an undergraduate summer research fellowship program, but it has a lot of legs. We go to industry site during the first part of the summer for our first kickoff event. Then the students go to the labs that they will be spending their summers in the Chicago Quantum Exchange ecosystem. And at the end, they all come to the University of Chicago to give their research presentations at the OQI Research Symposium. But then we provide throughout the year programming, support, and networking opportunities for the fellows. And we have a really, really successful program in that students end up coming back to quantum, stay in quantum, or move into positions, internships that they really wanted. There's a Teach Quantum, which is a program focused on getting high school teachers engaged and getting curriculum into high schools. Then there's Quantum Quick Start, which is really looking to get the students, high school students, engaged as early as possible. And this I will put in the chat real quick right now. This is done by the Chicago Quantum Exchange and Boeing. This is a little, excuse me, a little video series focused on high school students, just to introduce and engage and hopefully interest people from coming in to come in from all walks of life, and QuSTEAM, which I will pass it off to Bennet to introduce and talk about. And I am very happy to be a part of this initiative, and yeah, really glad to be here.
Thanks so much. And we'll make sure that the YouTube audience has those links here in just a moment. So thanks, Bennett, for joining us as well.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really a pleasure to connect with the user community beyond the QuSTEAM network. I'm the executive director of the QuSTEAM initiative, a nonprofit incorporated in Ohio as a result of the NSF Convergence Accelerator grant of the same name that you see the principal investigators there on the right side. So Russell Ceballos, Chicago Quantum Exchange in Physics, is listed third on that list. He was, during that 2-year NSF Convergence Accelerator funded effort, a coordinator across 7 teams among 72 professors at 20 institutions. And my job was to incorporate a nonprofit to scale that work from those 19 institutions to 300 institutions in 2027 is our goal. We are a nonprofit, but we aim to scale like a startup, but without VC capital. We've stood up services that represent the range of services that our initial 19 campuses asked for to launch or expand quantum information science and engineering programs at the undergraduate level. So what Russell talked to you about from the Chicago Quantum Exchange and the universities like the University of Chicago or University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, the members of the Chicago Quantum Exchange overlap significantly with, so UIUC is also a member of the QuSTEAM initiative, as is University of Chicago, but the R1s that incorporated initially span the research universities, the R1s. Ohio State University was the lead founding member, Michigan, Michigan State, and North Carolina Ag and Tech, which is the country's largest HBCU, historically Black college or university, were co-founders of the QuSTEAM nonprofit, which we're now scaling and continuing sustaining the services that were created under the nonprofit grant, so under the NSF grant. So the NSF grant was to develop and pilot 4 courses in quantum information at the undergraduate level across 2- and 4-year institutions. The list that you see at the top right there, those institutions include, they're majority minority serving institutions. Most of them are MSIs, and they include a set of community colleges. And then we've added the University of Iowa, Middle Tennessee State University. These are support, like they found the money in their campuses to offer the services on their campuses from QuSTEAM that would promote their programs. So Russell's going to mostly talk to you about the modular curricula, and in particular how he's using the materials that he's developed in the classroom the ways that he's engaged with the rest of the team that spans a huge host of disciplines, everything from business, economics, chemistry, philosophy, to what you'd expect of the 4 founding disciplines of quantum information science and engineering. So those would be math, computer science, physics, and electrical engineering. And our founding board, I'm going to scroll back a slide, you'll notice spans not only a wide range of institutions, but all of the departments that I just mentioned. I want to call out in particular Ray Samuel I mentioned NCAT is the largest HBCU. He heads the IBM Quantum Computing Center, IBM HBCU Quantum Computing Center at NCAT, which of course is headed at Howard University as a national institution. So I'll turn it back to Russell to talk about his work using some of the curriculum that he and this huge team of professors, a quarter of whom are educational researchers, really trying ultimately to scale early to non-R1 institutions using pedagogical tools in the classroom that are evidence-based and known to develop a sense of belonging and a change in identity to that of a STEM career professional. So thank you again for the opportunity. I guess I was introducing myself too, so I'm going to take 30 more seconds and mention that I have 20, my background is 20 years of experience in the high school classroom at the college, in the college classroom, sort of at the boundary, focused on upper high school education, lower undergraduate education. So the first 4 courses out of an 8-course set that QuSTEAM developed are for freshmen and sophomores with very little prerequisites, no prerequisites, a gen ed. We have a whole menu of courses I could jump ahead to, but so my work has been, I should have had that slide at the ready there, but my work previous to QuSTEAM, I have degrees in physics from MIT, from the University of Iowa, in which I studied femtosecond laser characterization of semiconductor materials grown by MBE to develop triple junction solar cells. So, you know, I got the physics chops, but mostly my background has been in education. I wrote a computer science course for the national nonprofit Project Lead the Way and scaled during the first 4 years of operation to a whole team, a K-12 program that we were also studying in conjunction with Purdue, and taught the teachers that the first 60 teachers that implemented the AP Computer Science Principles course, the instance of which I had written, and then worked with them to scale to over 1,000 schools. I don't know how many they're in now with that program. So thank you, Russell. I really appreciate all the work you've led here at in the nonprofit phase, and that you continued to work with for both CQE and QuSTEAM. Thank you to Wolfram.
Thank you. And actually, I think I'm going to kick it right back to you, Bennett. Keep it with you there. If you keep that, there's your screen shared with that deck.
Sorry.
No. Could you go into a little bit more of the comprehensive overview of the suite of services that QuSTEAM is currently providing, and you know, sort of give a little overview of that, and how this minor fits into that?
Let's see. The best deck for that really would be,
and specifically when you say QuSTEAM minor, you're talking about sort of the level of study that one would expect from a minor degree in, let's say, a university course of study. This is the analog of that. But one thing I'm curious about is you also mentioned sort of these non-traditional, outside of you know, getting a degree ways of understanding quantum information science. And so one thing, you know, I'd love to also talk more about is, you know, in this suite of services, there's all these different cohorts of, you know, quantum information has some common threads, but also looks a little bit different, maybe in the context of, let's say, adult education or college students or younger students. So help our audience understand some of these different threads and how they all tie in together to the overarching theme of having people understand more about quantum information science.
Yeah, so I think I'll take the last part of your question first. Like, what does it look like at the different levels? So the Chicago Quantum Exchange, of course, is engaged with all 3 levels, at the graduate level, the undergraduate level, sort of the public-facing level, like the Open Quantum Initiative. And then the K-12 initiative for the United States is the Q12 initiative, which was initially based at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. Our focus has been undergraduate education. And so I can certainly talk about the differences there, but I'll pivot from, in both cases, the undergraduate level. So what we've developed is for students that don't necessarily know anything beforehand. We assume algebra, but even there we provide bridge material because we're really aiming to broaden participation and provide new kinds of on-ramps. And by we, I mean QuSTEAM. So the difference between undergraduate and graduate education and workforce direct education, upskilling, reskilling, is really in sort of what you assume. So a chemist coming to look to add quantum chemistry understanding, like how to run VQE, doesn't want a review of trig. So our materials really try to start with the undergraduate classroom. The high school necessarily is shallower, is shorter, is meant for inclusion in, high school teachers are already under intense challenge in days down to minutes to cover established standards. I was co-chair of the Iowa Computer Science Standards team and had engagement at the national level as the US adopted computer science standards. And, even to get one bullet item in there about quantum computing right now, that's more than we have. So, at the K-12 level, there's great work being done. Fermilab's developed a fantastic QKD activity, for instance, but it just looks different. There are long documents about opportunities to incorporate in AP Physics or AP Computer Science courses that come from the Q12 initiative. But ultimately, there's not a lot of overlap except for the first course here, which we structure as a gen ed. So, this first course in the QuSTEAM sequence of 6 courses for a minor, or 8 out of 8 courses, that looks like the high school and the middle school stuff.
And as a matter of fact, very specifically, we have engaged with community colleges at the outset. So to kind of reframe the conversation of the different types of players, if you will, in the ecosystem and the different levels, the educational levels, how it all kind of plays out, what we are focused on as an organization is accelerating the ramp up of the workforce. And in order to do that, we need to train people as well. In order to train people, like we need to help educate faculty on one side to learn subject matter expertise on the other side, learning how, like, education research and how to implement it. And on the third side, even, there's just tools from industry that a lot of faculty are hesitant to engage with, and for a lot of different reasons, understandable reasons. And so it's trying to navigate the overall space in order to focus efforts that will, in the long term, pay out exponentially. And so for us, our focus is at the undergraduate level, both developing the curriculum, but developing curriculum to help introduce the notion of QISE to faculty and help faculty learn to develop their own curriculum. So kind of a flywheel structure. And so what we have in this is a lot of material and content that's very raw and rough, but spans, as Bennet was saying, a zero math background assumption. A high school diploma is assumed on some level because they are taking college class. But a GED is absolutely equivalent in this case. So we want to make sure, on one hand, this connects to those individuals, and that's a lot of the general public, adult public, right, in the United States of America. And so fortunately for us, that means that. And so on one hand, we are able to engage and connect with the broader community and the public on one hand, and we're, but like Bennet was saying, I'm going to kick it back over to him. We have the sort of focus at the undergraduate level for some very specific reasons, and what we are doing there to make sure that people have the resources and tools required to, again, ramp up the quantum activity and programming in their own institution in order to establish programs, establish internship, right, opportunities, and just, you know, the full span the space of quantum, if you will. And so, yeah, Bennett, please.
I don't want to take any time from you, Russell, because I really want you to present how you use these tools in your classroom and how that connects to Wolfram. I'll mention, when I was working at the high school space, students no previous knowledge of coding whatsoever, but they used Python to access a large database and plot a graph of the frequency of their name versus year and analyze a very much larger data set. But they used Wolfram Alpha for that too, and then saw like what other abstractions can you create that you can interact with large data sets through tools like Wolfram Alpha, like Mathematica, to deal symbolically. So I just wanted to kind of mention the industry integration at the high school level too is completely possible. But at the college level, we've really given access to, so I mentioned 6 categories of services when I had that other screen up. So access to quantum devices through virtual experiences, where there's an actual quantum device, but you're accessing it remotely through a webcam and motors on polarizers and so on. But that's one category. But another category is curriculum modules. And I think, Russell, what you were passing it back to me to talk about was the trifecta that QuSTEAM is trying to address. So not only are we trying to create more ramps and include more people, and specifically to expand the workforce in QIAC, but we're also trying to improve STEM education broadly. So by including in professional development for faculty, like, okay, you're coming from any discipline, so I can't assume you know how to code. I can't assume you know quantum mechanics, and I can't assume really that you know how to deal with matrices. So ultimately, we're talking about, it doesn't matter if they're an entering undergraduate, a high school student, or a faculty, because everybody feels uncomfortable. This is a big lift for a campus to launch a quantum information science and engineering program. And for that reason, professors are looking for materials that they can implement even turnkey, or that they can adapt at an R1. Those faculty are getting course release time to develop a course. So they want tools. Everybody wants good stuff that'll include students, that's good with all students, that engages students, that follows evidence, but they don't know how to do that. It's been a recalcitrant problem to do what's known to be best practice, which is anything but lecture. So what we try to do is provide not only tools that let professors use backward design, where there's tight alignment between goals, what the students do to produce evidence they understand, and the assessment that is based on that. So backward design is huge. This is a deck that comes from our 0 course, which is so we have courses 0 through 8. Course 0 is for faculty or high school teachers. And so understanding that if you start class with a student engagement, that you'll build a community, and that it actually changes student identities, and that it gives you a chance to overhear some students talking about things that are based in their expertise, of their experience in TIE. And so we provide slides that specifically allow that, like, when's the time that you thought 2 things at once, that you felt 2 things at once, but it wasn't until you acted that you sort of settled on 1 of 2 inconsistent courses of action. That superposition in a hand-wavy way, and talking about how it is and isn't a good metaphor for superposition, is a good thing to do. We think we're studying that.
It's nice to see these explicit reflections included in STEM curriculum, right? Because I recall from my educational psychology courses that creating these opportunities where, after students have dealt with phenomena, maybe they've used computers in helping them model something, having this really explicit reflection about understanding how what they've just been doing connects with the sort of bigger picture of what they're trying to gain an understanding in a new area can really help them, as you say, both form an identity as someone who is on the path to becoming an expert in this area, but also helps with the retention of knowledge and sort of the community aspect of learning as well.
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon University did a fantastic job. It's in Kicking Butt in Computer Science, described how they pivoted from a tiny percentage of women to 50% women in their undergraduate computer science program. And it's all about redefining what's in the discipline. So this is not about physics and electrical engineering. This is about everything, because quantum is going to impact everything. You want to be a chemist, you need to know about quantum, but you want to be anything, it helps to understand at the high level. An executive needs to know about quantum at a high level. And so starting with why is this so important is a very important strategy. And including the arts is huge. These students have designed a dance describing Cooper pairs, having projects like entangling two 8-sided dice. So that's a 7-qubit program right there. And every student result looks different because they had a hand in designing what the result was supposed to look like. But how you instruct, having active learning opportunities, professors really shouldn't be talking for more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time before asking the audience something. So let me ask, are people able to chime in, or is it question only?
Well, so we actually do have a couple of audience comments already that people are saying they would have loved to have more courses on both quantum information, quantum algorithms when they were in school, right? Because as you were saying, there has been a need arguably for this kind of curriculum for a long time, but in recent, as the technologies of building quantum hardware kind of mature, it becomes an even more salient need, right? So we are having some audience comments already about, they would have loved to have things like this when they were in school. And speaking of such things as well, you did mention as well that, Russell, if you'd like to show sort of how you go about implementing some of this curriculum. As I understand, you're teaching a course at Chicago State University for students to understand quantum information science better. And these are students who are coming from a computer science background, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's correct. But it was a seminar course that only had faculty, instructor approval. And so we had all walks of life. I had a student who was a biology student and is trying to come into quantum. And so it was. And then the thing is at Chicago State, there are many non-traditional students. And by non-traditional, I mean of all type. And that includes students who have been going to school for, forever, but not been able to get the degree or take certain classes and for the credit. And so I have students that have been trying to get into quantum since I was faculty there in 2017, and they're still at it. And so they come when they can, and so they and people, they haven't been engaged for a long time, so they've forgotten math. So even the computer science students, it's kind of a really tough challenge to get cut the circle, right? Chicken or the egg, where do you start in a circle? And it's kind of like, well, you got to start in somewhere. You just got to jump in the middle, start somewhere. And so to kind of frame this, the notion that you can do this at all. So I am young enough, old enough to have been told that this won't work at Chicago State University. Like you'll never be able to teach a graduate class in quantum computing at Chicago State University. There's not going to be interest there. The students can't do it. And there's just so many reasons why.
And sure enough, you're teaching one, in fact, in counter to that what you had been told, right?
That's right. I mean, and we have a center there. So CUBE here, we see NSF CUBE, Quantum Sensing for Biophysics and Bioengineering, is a National Science Foundation funded Quantum Leap Challenge Institute. And our Workforce Development Center Institute, part of that center is at Chicago State University. We have, I mean, there's just so many things going on now, right? And so it's kind of shocking, I think, sometimes to hear that there was such a resistance against even trying to do any of this at the time. In 2017, I was crazy, right? So when I went to Chicago State in 2017, I was bananas talking about doing quantum, and at the time it would have been the first real undergraduate program in the country. At Chicago State University, we had that opportunity, but because there's just this really overwhelming feeling or mentality that it just doesn't belong here and we don't belong in this space, that has still been a huge challenge. Even though one of the students you see here in the Open Quantum Initiative picture, Joseph, he's in the reflection there. He's from Chicago State University, and he was at IBM there, and he's so we've had so many different wonderful sort of points of progress, but the wall is huge. And so to sort of, this is where it all started at Chicago State University. So this is actually a little bit thinking about it, it's a little emotional because right, I am from this, like literally the south and southeast, the southeast side of Chicago, which if you know what that means, you know. But if most people are like southeast, but what is that? No, south side, and what's this east? Well, South Deering, the east side, and South Chicago proper is the neighborhoods that I'm from. And then we moved out to Headwish for a bit. So my mom went to Chicago State, my aunt went to Chicago State. Most anybody that I know who went to college, I went down the street, down 95th Street to Chicago State University. I got my first library access to read my first physics books at Chicago State University Library, right? Because my mom had a library card. They don't have that, right? At the public, just these gravitation. Anybody tried to get a book, the book Gravitation by John Wheeler and Kip Thorne from a Chicago Public Library down, right, on 90, whatever, 100th and whatever. Yeah, good luck finding that even in the suburbs when we had to move out to the suburbs. I was able to find a Kip Thorne book out in the suburbs at a library, but it was more of a popular science one, right? And I had already gotten in and dipped into gravitation, you know, at that point, right? So because of Chicago State University. So Chicago State University is just, it's a lighthouse, right, for my community. And so when I was there as a lecturer, doing the research and trying to do everything, David Ashalam approached me and was like, hey, you know, there's this opportunity. We would love you to join and help lead this effort up. And so I probably still have the email somewhere, right? It was just like unbelievable. And while I was there, this QuSTEAM is the opportunity to start doing what we needed to make quantum real and to make it happen. And I'm still on that journey, and I'm still trying my best to bring it there on a programmatic, on a higher level. But again, like from being told that it's impossible to then even 2020-ish getting let go from Chicago State as a lecturer, which is insane. Public records, you could see how much a lecturer makes at Chicago State University. And it's like I was fighting for that. But it just didn't belong. Quantum just didn't belong at CSU at the time. And so I'm still trying to fight to bring it back there. And so this is how we do it. So I couldn't do it alone by myself, right? So while I was there, and this is like, this is nothing on IBM, right? It's just how in the dark we are on the south side of Chicago, how literally no one sees us and even thinks we exist in this space. They had come out with the IBM HBCU Quantum Computing Center while I was at Chicago State University. And I was like, man, you know, I don't know of anybody from one of these neighborhoods who went out, got their PhD in quantum, came back to their neighborhood and was like doing the quantum thing and is trying to push this quantum thing. But they had no idea about me, right? But there wasn't anybody really out there to this day. There's not many people like that. I don't, you know, so that was just how in the dark we were. So I needed to be able to connect with industry. I needed to connect with other universities that had the resources and the faculty and the passion, the interest, the drive to do this quantum thing. And so University of Chicago Quantum Exchange, that was the network, that was the ecosystem that said, yeah, you know, this is what we have to do. Let's try to figure this out. And Zeke is the PI. He couldn't be with us today, but he was David Ashalam's grad student, right, back in Santa Barbara. And so it's kind of all in the family. Zeke's at the OSU, the Ohio State University now, and he's PI. So it's kind of started as a seed in the Midwest and with that kind of network. But again, to then start from that phase 1 grant to then apply for phase 2 and to get the full funding to try to really stand up a full organization, we kind of started with a small flywheel and the notion was this. And again, this is all coming from the needs that I was experiencing as a quantum information theorist trying to make quantum happen at Chicago State University, solo really at the time, is that we needed things that were modular. We needed things in the sense that you develop something that has tethers so that you can put it into any course or a set of pre-existing courses in a meaningful way. So what do I mean by that? For example, at Chicago State, one thing we're doing with Cube Center is developing like a certificate program that, and it's really Val Goss and Archie Peters, right, leading that effort. They're there, and we're looking to establish existing coursework to implement the quantum curriculum that we have and that even QSTEAM has developed. Because at places like Chicago State University, the notion that you can create a new class is insane. It's just laughed out of the room outright, because who's going to teach it? Who's going to develop it? Who's going to spend the time to pass it through the curriculum committee? It's just a no-go. It's just a literally, there's no hiring. There's really like, there's no develop. You work with what you got. Like literally, like when you're in these spaces, you have to work with what you have. And
I remember we had talked when we first met about how quantum education has kind of a bootstrapping problem, because not only is there a need to have students quickly accelerated to be quantum ready, but also, as you were just alluding to, there's not the numbers of faculty that we would like to have to teach all of the students. If you are let's say associated with let's say I don't know, like University of Chicago or University of Illinois, like there are some faculty who've already sort of had that training. But if we're talking about quantum everywhere, which is kind of the goal, then you need more faculty who are going to step up and teach quantum as well. And so you're just alluding to the need for having curriculum materials that allow people to do that easily.
Exactly. And curriculum materials that are easily accessible, that work well out of the box, and that don't break and that you don't always have to fix, or someone who can do it. You can call, like for us working. So for me, and I will get to this here in a second, Mathematica, of course, has been a staple of my toolbox. Actually, probably the main tool that I use other than a pencil and a piece of paper, stick in sand, because of exactly what I was just saying. It's tried and true, easy to use, easy to teach somebody how to use. So and it works. Honestly, I mean, that might not sound like a real high bar, but if you're in the computational space, if you're in the technology space, and then you're in the education space, man, those are a lot of really small needles that you have to thread in order to really get this braid working, right? And so that it's an amazing thing Mathematica had, what Wolfram has done with Mathematica. And we are working with QBraid to work on the coding side of that platform. And finding a way to integrate those two would be amazing. Chicago Quantum Exchange had provided me with this amazing iPad. I've never had anything like that, where I can write and put on the screen, like share remotely and all that, and it like works, with the writing tool. It just, the Apple II Pencil for math. It's really hard to find these types of tools that you can use, integrate with all these other software and other tools, and these all do talk to each other. And so accessibility is key. And as we will see, and what I want to highlight is there's accessibility to technology, but it comes in two forms. One is really computer-based and digital, I will say, and the other comes in hands-on experience. And so far, both have been hurdles for many different reasons. Interestingly enough, the computer technology, if you will, the digital wall, is actually much lower for the students than it is for the faculty.
That's an interesting observation. So
yeah, it's a lot easier to get the students engaged and working on their phones, right? So like that's when, especially QBraid, I was like, oh, okay, we got to do something like this, because they're able to like literally develop code. Somebody can code off their phone and run a quantum program off their phone, right? Like, and the thing is, that might sound crazy. Who would do that? Well, someone who doesn't have a computer.
Right.
And a lot of my students don't, right? So when COVID happened, people don't understand what kind of emergency situation that put us in. And now nobody realized it, because our students were dying, their families were dying, from COVID, right? This was something that people were dropping like flies. And so I took this COVID like very seriously. And around me in the suburbs and other places, it was kind of like, oh man, you're being extra about this. Like it's not all that. I'm like, well, you don't know my community, like my family friends, like we were losing all kinds of people. Every week it was another story of a student of it. And so we don't hear about the technology crisis that so many students just dropped out and they don't have computers, so they can't come to class. They can't. It was terrible for Chicago State. We were finally clawing our way back, and then this happens. And even when the students could get online on their phones, they couldn't get a strong signal. They couldn't get a secure signal, a stable signal, and they can't use their cameras. So if you're lucky, you're talking to yourself on a blank screen at best at Chicago State trying to teach at this point. And so the phone was crucial, and it made me realize how important technology and industry and connecting with industry is going to be in order to make quantum accessible to everybody. And so so the whole idea is to structure these modules, which can be ported into all these different places, because like you were saying, faculty don't have the experience to just go and teach, or the institutions don't have the ability to just go and create a whole program or ecosystem for quantum to live in. And so they take what they can, what they're comfortable with, and put into their class. So modern physics is a great example. Modern physics has relativity and an introduction to quantum mechanics through a historical perspective, typically. But if you restructure that, you can take this and some of these modules and take quantum information science and work it into modern physics curriculum and still hit all the learning objectives and still get at the principles. And so that's one example. But again, what we are seeing is that this is a full ecosystem issue. And so we need to rebuild STEM pedagogy without, if you will, legacy barriers. To me, that means bias, preparation bias. So right now it's a matter of, well, yeah, anybody can get into quantum if you've taken linear algebra, taking differential, you start listing all the courses that you've had to take before you can get in. And it's like, yeah, it's for everybody, except, and so how do we get at this, right? So customized curriculum, making it modular, recruitment, community network, bringing more people in, faculty, students, public engagement, administration, deans, right? Everybody, industry partners. And then there's professional development. And these arrows actually go both ways, right? All around. And so professional development is, again, for STEM pedagogy as well as subject matter expertise. I'm just going to skip over this, and hopefully we can all understand that we want to be competitive, right? And to be honest, I'm not here trying to sell everybody on the, oh, let's hold hands and kumbaya. It's like, no. I want to be competitive. Like I want to do the best science that I can do, not just as an individual, but as a community, right? Not just as a community member of the South Side of Chicago, but as a person of this country, as a person of this world. And so I don't, personally, I went to University of Chicago, I went to a lot of elite institutions, but the attitude I have is very much one from my neighborhood, which is that we don't accept like lesser than, we don't compromise our values in many ways. We don't compromise on certain things. There's just certain things we don't compromise on. And excellence is something I and my community cannot compromise on. So when we bring ourselves, our full selves to the table, you're getting a competitive advantage, a fully competitive individual that's bringing everything they have to compete, not just to maybe do something well, but to compete. And that's the kind of culture we need in the United States right now to establish ourselves as the international leader. I mean, we were, and now we're kind of like, it's where people are vying, and Australia is out there, you know what I mean? I mean, we got the UK doing their thing, and we've got the Netherlands doing their thing. And of course, man, China pushing is breathing down our necks. And that's not a problem, but let's face it, they have a very different, as a government, they have a very different set of values and opinions about how information works and how they function in their society. And so, for me, I want to be the most competitive, and I want to make sure we as a country are as competitive as we can be. And here we see IBM talking about how we can do this, and faculty strategy and QuSTEAM is a huge part of that, right? Developing a diverse ecosystem and making it national. So the main thing is, right, we want to make sure we're front loading concepts, back loading mathematical formalisms, making sure that the courses are project based and involve industry, employers, right, at all stages of development. Why all that is important? Because at the end of the day, we want the students to be able to have employable skills. And by employable, we're talking about grad school, right? That's an employment opportunity. So if you're able to do the research, get into grad school, that's wonderful. So when we're doing this and developing these programs and curricula, we're not saying like, oh, well, research isn't important, and we're just going to train people to do something for companies specific. It's like, no, we want to make people competitive for the whole space and for all the opportunities.
Since
right?
the same skill set really is relevant to many of these different pursuits, right? And having that, as you mentioned, front load the concepts so that people then can decide, okay, so in the area, let's say I'm a chemist or I'm a biologist, or whatever the area that they specifically care about, they can then take on board whatever the mathematical formalism is necessary, which might look a little bit different in each of these areas from what it looks like from the way that you've designed your curriculum.
Exactly. That's the whole thing, right? I mean, quantum mechanics is the same, right? And confirmation theory is effectively the same. I mean, there's a few ways you can take it, and you can use Heisenberg, approach, or Schrodinger, but it's really the same. You can have your interpretations all you want. The results are going to be the same. Your calculations are going to be the same. And so what you need is like reskinning, if you will, and that kernel is why I, in particular, have been pushing the notion of leveraging game design theory and game theory in order to do exactly what you were just talking about. Take the core concepts and the core skill set that's required, so for quantum and many other STEM fields, foundational fields like AI and artificial and machine learning, linear algebra, statistics, and ultimately strategic games, like the idea of strategy. And so you have these three elements, and all of a sudden you can reskin these core elements into many different types of games. There's the CHSH game. There's just so many different games that you can just there's the hack game coming out of game theory and then taking it into a quantum analog, which is what I do.
Yeah, the CHSH game is one of our favorites for when we do presentations on understanding the difference between classical and quantum in terms of how this impacts what you can do with an algorithm.
And that's how I actually introduce a lot of my talks. Like my favorite way to introduce it is through CHSH. That hey, you want to know why quantum is important? We'll see what you can do with quantum that you can't do classically. Like that notion, not that, oh, this thing that we can predict now win this game is the end of the world, is the be all end all, but it's the fact that you have like the notion that you can see that, oh, this used to be impossible, but now that I have this new quantum tool, which is just a system in my hands, the tool is having a system. It's just an object, and being able to understand what you can do with that object, and that's the most important thing. And so it's taking that idea and trying to put it into every layer of our engagement. And again, like I was saying, QBraid is one of these. Diagrammatic calculus, trying to develop.
Yeah, I want to real quick inject an audience question that we had, as it looks like you're getting into this topic, right? So you were showing the way that you use QBraid and diagrammatic things to work with circuits there. So our audience question was that they'd love to see more of what you were talking about in terms of what does your teaching and projects look like in terms of what are the students doing and working on. And so yeah, you mentioned that you have some stuff here that you can screen share that the audience is definitely very interested to see that. So it looks like that was right what you were about to start talking about before I injected that little audience comment.
While he gets his screen ready, I've been dying to jump in there.
Please.
One of the baskets of services that we offer out of the 6 baskets is recruiting students. And so one of the things we'll do is help you stand up a quantum club or a quantum hackathon. And we did that. Of course, we use QBraid for that. MIT uses QBraid for their hackathon. It is the tool of choice because you can specify the virtual container and all the packages that the student. So what Russell's about to show you is a Jupyter notebook executing on QBraid, and we make that easy for you. We provide a teacher dashboard that you can only get through us for distributing QPU credits. We pass through quantum processing unit credits from manufacturers. Okay, so that's another category I just worked in there. But the recruitment services of a hackathon, when you were talking about the CHSH game, we ran a hackathon in which the winner was the group that produced a Jupyter notebook that explained their results executing a program that at least made a bell pair and measured it on a real quantum computer. And so the winner, which, they each got cash and swag, and they were 3 students that spanned Canada, the United States, and India, and had written an explanation of their data using the CHSH game. And it was great pedagogical stuff that they produced. And so that's one of the things you get, as a professor at a QSTEAM affiliated university, is the output of all these other people's work teaching things in innovative ways and riffing on it, having the right to make derivative content from their content and share it with the network. It's really important that we work together because this is changing fast. I have behind me 20 linear feet of bookshelf space in textbooks that might be appropriate for a quantum information undergraduate course of one type or another. It's a lot to sort through. It's expensive just to look at it. So having access to resources that are ready to go, but also informed not only by the materials out there, but also by industry and national labs, it's a hard thing for one campus. I'm just going to say it requires a network. So Russell, thank you. Sorry for jumping in.
Oh no, man! Actually, you couldn't have done better. Oh crap! I went to the wrong. Went to the beginning. Give me 1 second. That was literally, I couldn't have asked to get set up better than it. We need a network. The tools you're going to see, I'm going to show you. But I really wanted to stress that we did not develop all these tools. We did not. Again, you're going to show you Mathematica. We didn't develop that. But what we do at QSTEAM, and what particularly I'm focused on in my work, is trying to bring people together and trying to bring resources together to share. I mean, it sounds so basic and so corny and so,
It's actually a hard problem though, right?
I mean, that's the thing, is it's like I spend so much of time, energy, effort, and it's hard. I haven't been able to be like, oh, we have everything working in out of the box. So what we have is the ability in QSTEAM to connect across communities and campuses and ecosystems. So some places are better at quantum computing, some places are better at quantum sensing. Some people have, like in Chicago, man, we got the network, science going on. But when we have our Japanese colleagues, Rodney Van Meter, I had showed him earlier, out in Japan with networking. And so we had somebody, Chris Porter, teach a class at the OSU, along with Pietro Veronesi, professor at Booth School of Business and a dean at the University of Chicago. And they were able to co-teach across the institution with that first pilot class. And they had amazing projects. Here are those projects. And they talked about societal impact and did amazing things. We can't, this is a little old fly trap, but we do have VQuil, which is, I think, an upgrade to this anyways. And that is Brian LaCour's group's sort of work out of UT Austin. And we are connected with them, along with, I've developed some games here on the right-hand side. But then to leverage, like we were saying, diagrammatic calculus and trying to bring them, there's a prototype of a game that I wouldn't play, but I had developed and a student coded up for me. But the one thing I want to, right before I get into the code, there's 2 things. One thing is the code and the digital resources are one thing, and VQuil is one of those digital resources, even though it's a quantum optics, sort of environment to learn in. At the same time, we have hands-on, but it has to be remote. So accessibility is key. And so, so I want to center the idea of everything that I'm talking about and all the tools that I'm using. It's with the idea that I'm trying to establish sets of tools that are rigorously tested, assessed, and again, do not fail, that can all be remotely accessed on some level, like as much as possible, right? As much as possible. And the reason is, to begin with, we use set theory, and we use this is graph theory on the right with benzene. And people don't know that these are linear operators, differential operators defined on the edges and the nodes of molecules, and that give you these structures, and talk about the Lewis notation and all that. No, you know how to push electrons, you know how to push dots, and you learn how to work with the tools to give it to you. Nobody has to know full Cantor set theory in order to use a Venn diagram. And so, yeah, right now the thing on the bottom might not be really decipherable to everybody, but it's been my estimation that we can develop those tools, and that's something that, you know, I'm trying to still do. But then again, there's hands-on experiences. And so this is something that I am working on bringing into the classroom and building out curriculum for with UIC and other places. But this is what I do now, and what we do have the ability to do now, which is work with Mathematica, and unfortunately I didn't have a nice notebook that was organized that I thought to prepare for this, but you can see that I have used the iPad. Oh, there's somebody. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Bennett. And so we have QBraid. And really what you do is you go to QSTEAM.org, and here we go. So I need an incognito private. So you go to QSTEAM.org, and you go to log into QBraid, and you set up an account there for free. And you get in and you have access to a whole bunch of tutorials and code. So here's what I finished the CSU course with. It was all built up to be able to run Grovers using a 3-qubit register to look through an 8-element list. And this is one of the tutorials Amazon had developed and QBraid provides. And it's really set up out of the box. And so I just run through this. We go through the classical simulator. We have, oh, sorry, I was on Grovers. This was what Bennett was just talking about. I clicked over to this to highlight the hackathon problem that Bennett was talking about. Apologies. I just went.
You have Grovers in the next tab in QBraid.
Yeah. I pulled back to this one. So I have this one open, and I just want to show people that this is what Bennett was talking about, and this is all accessible for free on QBraid right now, along with this. And this is what I went and built up the course to do and focus on at the end of the day, is I wanted students to have the basic understanding of the gates involved of the oracle and the diffusion operator. And I did not exclusively use just this tutorial. We worked in a lot of basic math and then matrix, operator algebra, and worked into the actual algorithm for Grovers at a high level. I like this article here.
I've also put into the chat for our audience that they should be able to see pretty soon here some examples that we have on Grover's algorithm too, because I always like to see it looks like we're in perfect alignment on what teaching examples we always like to reach for is ones that students should build towards use to understand the concepts involved here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was looking for some tabs, and I was going to hit on this, but one of my go-to tabs for my class is Wolfram, right? And it's your tutorial, right? And so I love this. And so what we have is a suite, right, of all these resources, and there's just no real one unified place yet to engage. And so QBraid is starting to become one of these, I feel like, platforms where we might be able to integrate some of this stuff, because that's the thing, right? There's all this amazing things out there, and unfortunately or fortunately, there is no quote unquote silver bullet or whatever. There's no one solution to a general problem. I mean, it's very much like, I won't go into the analogy in quantum, but you're not, yeah. So you're not going to be able to do both things at the same time. So because you want to bring everyone involved, engage, you want to engage everybody, and they come from all walks of life. So there's no one way to approach any one thing, because you're trying to constantly bring in new people who don't have the background or have had the privilege of being trained in the way that makes sense how you can engage with the audience. And
I want to jump in there because every campus is different, but there is an overlap that's big between any two campuses. And there's always a campus out there that has a huge overlap. So a community college with an existing microelectronics program is different than a community college with an existing program in HVAC, is different than a Stanford, is different than an undergraduate only institution that has logistics company next door. So, whether even you go in the software or hardware direction, or which direction in hardware, ought to be influenced by the research directions of the faculty, the neighboring job market, and so on. And so every place is different, but everybody needs help doing it, and can benefit from collaborating in a way that is frankly more open than I think academics are maybe used to. The model that you keep things to yourself until it's published, it's been improved by the archive and so on, but I'm seeing a lot of enthusiasm among faculty to contribute materials there where they can maintain their own copyright, but they're giving permission to a large network to use the materials, create derivative work, and with attribution. So the attribution is key for academics, and version control is key. So you know who contributed what, but some system to include everything out there. VQual is not our tool, right? University of Texas, Austin is not in the QuSTEAM network, but we speak with them. We meet with everybody who will meet with us and find out what are the strengths in your campuses. How can we direct people to the right graduate program, to find the right advisor, to the right undergraduate program? This is a complicated problem.
Mm-hmm. And actually, we have a great audience question that I want to inject here related to some of these topics, which is that our audience is really interested to know. So how can places like the Chicago Quantum Exchange, QuSTEAM, industry partners like Wolfram, what can we do to increase opportunities for women in quantum? And what are some things that are already being done along these lines?
Absolutely, I'll take that. In large part, we see that a lot of the efforts. So for me, my main effort is in when we talk about broadening participation. I mean that with a capital B and a capital P, and so that's everybody, and women, especially African American women. So we have for example, there are a number of programs. The Open Quantum Initiative that I was talking about is one of these programs. It's a program that addresses the problem of, well, how do you get experience if you need experience to get experience? And we, faculty of color, particularly, and Kayla Lee out at IBM, independently, we all have very similar experiences, right? The world is what it is, and we have very similar experiences. And so when I was at a conference talking about my experiences and the barriers to inclusion and what I've been proposing to try to get around this, they were like, oh, we're talking about the same thing, which is that even when we get funding, even when we get an opportunity to do something in quantum, so they had the IBM HBCU Quantum Center, but their students still weren't getting IBM internships. And it was because, well, they didn't have the research experience as other applicants. And so even though they're now engaged in this network and they're starting to get some experience and some research kind of thing, it just didn't stack up. And so it's like, okay, so we're always chasing our tail in a sense, or we're always chasing something. And so we're like, okay, how do we, again, cut the circle? And this program came out of the Chicago Quantum Exchange, a particular working group. So we were talking about, again, these barriers. And there was a working group at the Chicago Quantum Exchange of trainees and some faculty that were really looking to broaden participation and address this issue surrounding women, especially African-American women and the lack of them in STEM, but most importantly in quantum. And this program is one that focuses to broaden participation by helping establish equity, diversity, inclusion as priorities. But the real thing is, the assumptions of what are coming in are, you don't have to have research experience. You don't have to be at a university. You can be at a community college. You can be a first year. The idea was to really make something so that we could focus on first year type students and really provide a lot of opportunities for students that would never get an opportunity but now they can start early, come back, get, say, a normal REU at an institution, at one of their institutions, and the next summer, and then eventually get an internship at, again, IBM or one of these places. That was always the goal. And so the the quick quantum videos are also very much focused on this and trying to engage with everybody, and women in particular, and bring women into the field. It was edited and directed by Meredith and Becky, our team, the comms team. And so this is a huge focus of ours, and QuSTEAM is doing this in large part by I'm just gonna pull up the slide deck real quick, by these types of initiatives, so that people can see themselves. So this can be a bit of a tough slide to understand, because it's easy on one hand if you have some educational research experience, but there's so much implied here. So what does it mean to front load mathematical concepts, applications, and career awareness? This is saying that when we come to the classroom, everybody who's in that classroom brought something. They brought something really important. And women in particular, and minoritized individuals of all kinds, are often the first ones to have what they're bringing to the table ignored, because it doesn't fit into the typical preparation set of skills, maybe of experiences that the traditional framework has established as being prepared, established what it means to be prepared, which unfortunately, I think in science right now, in STEM, there's too much of a direct correlation between the concepts of being properly prepared and being capable of success. Mm-hmm. And those are two things. I understand how they go together. I understand that. But if we want to bring more people, including women, into the table, we cannot continue to do the same things we've been doing in the classroom. And that means developing relationships with employers that are women-led. So I have amazing collaborations with Sandbox AQ, and the education team there is led by Mariana, right? Bonamame. And so she's amazing. And of course there's Qubit by Qubit that we talk with. And so we want to make sure inclusion, equity, and is equity is the path to inclusion. So inclusion is the goal. Bring everybody into this field, and women in particular. So we want to make sure when we have materials, we have content, and we have speakers, we want to make sure we're representing everybody, and we have women speakers. Because there's plenty wonderful, amazing, talented professionals in the field. We don't need to always have the same kind of panel and the same type of speaker all the time. And so we are very active, and this is at the Chicago Quantum Exchange in particular, very focused on this. I mean, the Chicago Quantum Exchange itself is basically run and managed by the vast majority of women. I mean, there's vast majority, right? Our CEO to the directors, all our directors, other than David Ashalam. I mean, I can keep going, right? I mean, there's myself, David Tremora, David Ashalam in the actual organization. So, I mean, yeah, I might be forgetting somebody, but I don't know.
And to paraphrase some of this for the audience, we are talking about making sure that, when a student says, I want to go do a research opportunity for an undergraduate, or, maybe I'm not even at a university, but I want to go do a research experience because I know this is an industry that I want to know more about, making sure that the opportunities are there so that people can actually go do these and develop the skills that they're interested to learn.
And again, making sure that we are providing the proper professional development and the training to the faculty, to the institutions, so that when you have people coming from a different background, women in particular, who might not have in the past come to the program to learn this stuff, that you're not like, oh, well, you don't have this, this, and this, see you later. It's like, oh no, but you're bringing a lot of things to the table that are going to help you succeed. And we just never, counted them before, but now we see how that is important to team building, problem solving, project-based problem solving. So right there in the middle, project-based problem solving and team building. These are social skills. And when you have women engaged, when you have everyone involved in these projects and these teams, it makes it more competitive. It makes everything better. And so we have to, when we work with our industry employers very specifically with this in mind to develop projects that are inclusive, right? They're not just, what is effective? What does it mean to be effective? People are going to say, well, I just need it to be effective. I don't need to be inclusive. I'm like, well, the most effective educational content is inclusive. So because you're bringing everybody to the table and it's going to be able to reach everybody there. So that's the most effective thing. And if everybody's involved, everybody's engaged, then they can contribute. You're going to get an amplification effect. So it's, in order to get quantum ramped up, we need to engage and help develop the developmental cycle right now. I mean, so for me, the way I think about this is we are in a startup phase of quantum information science engineering technology. Like is a international culture. We're in the startup phase and people are vying. And who is going to succeed in this space? People who typically don't have the, if you will, have it made and have every opportunity laying out in front of them right now in the traditional space. You have to hustle, you have to make something of it. And oftentimes these are minoritized individuals who just haven't, their talent hasn't been recognized. Their inclusion has not been able to be, experienced because it's a barrier. There's a lot of understandable barriers. And so particularly with women, making sure that we are developing all of our programming and doing everything we can to make sure that what is in the world is inclusive in the most effective manner possible. And that again is not an easy task. What we tend to do in STEM is rely on what has been done in the past, and because it's tried and true. And we know that if we do it, so for example, I take a different approach, but there's the sink or swim approach. And I take a completely different approach. I take everyone on my team, right? Like I take everyone on my team. I don't care. But there's a sink or swim approach. You kick everyone off the pier and whoever gets back up, you're on my team. You can swim. Cool. We're going to go, we're going to swim, we're going to beat everybody out there. But I know everyone on my team can swim because they made it back up off the pier. Everyone else, I don't know, they're at the bottom. I don't know. I didn't see where they go. But for me, we bring everyone, and in that way, we will find a way to develop, either flotation devices or there's engineering involved, right? You take a different problem, right? I mean, physics is famous for this, right? I mean, as a physicist, this is how I was taught. It's like, okay, go establish a problem you want to work on. And then when you realize that problem's too hard, because it will be, I guarantee, that's what I was told. I guarantee you the problem you choose, it's going to be too hard. That's just the way it is. I don't care what you're doing. You're going to pick a problem. You're going to want to do something that's going to be too hard. And then what do? You take that problem and you break it up into smaller problems. And you take that set of problems and you pick one and you say, okay, which one can I solve here? And chances are that one you're not going to be able to solve. So you take that one and you break it up into, and you just keep this going until you have what physicists will call a well-defined problem. And that means something very specifically, which means it's a problem you know how to solve for the most part, right?
In principle, yeah,
in
right.
Principle. Exactly, right? Yeah. And so this is the same. We need to take that and we need to bring it to our social element of development, of building. And I really appreciate that question, because all of this can get really lost in the abstract high-level language, but what does it really look like to be inclusive? What does it really mean? And for me, it means surrounding myself with as many people who have not been traditionally engaged with or been able to come into the field and work together. Not because it's a matter of, oh, boo-hoo, woo-woo-woo, we got to help everybody. It's this is the competitive group. And this is who's going to learn how to be innovative in the space and how to transition into the space from a place where not just they weren't in quantum before, but that they didn't have a clear path to get into quantum. It was like impossible from where they were sitting to get in. So if we can figure out how to navigate that and include everyone there, the rest comes in a sense for free in the math sense.
So we have an audience question that sounds like it's coming from a person who is interested to start studying quantum. And so the question is, related to the backloaded mathematical concepts. So they're curious, what are some of these mathematical concepts that tends to be the most challenging for new students? And so maybe I would also sort of rephrase that question. So what are how would one front load appropriately so that someone who is thinking about getting into this but maybe worried about some of those mathematical formalisms and, oh well, what do I need to know, what do I not need to know, what are the things that you instead want to start with in terms of applications or fundamental concepts that then inform how you pick up these?
Yeah. So can I take that, Russell? So I think you have it almost, you started out by saying, well, I'm interested in getting into quantum. So you're over the hump there, right? The reason it's so, and I'm not saying you don't have to learn about careers and impacts and the concepts first. Those are the three principal ways in which we invert. So I think it is important you read some articles that at a high level describe how quantum will affect all industries, especially the ones that you care about, all academic disciplines, especially the ones that you care about, all hobbies and interests, especially the ones that you care about. So, tying to your interests, tying to careers, that's an evidence-based practice. We've known Change the Conversation indicated that especially for women, the messaging that you need to recruit people effectively is that advanced study in this field, continuing in this field, has the opportunity to work in teams, to change real people's lives, to solve real problems, to provide a flexible, wide-ranging opportunity for you career-wise. So if you've already checked those boxes for yourself, then I'd say dive into the mathematical material that seems accessible to you, and where you start to get frustrated, back up to the touchstones that I just mentioned. Why is this so important to society? What are the career opportunities I'm really trying to create for myself? And how does it lead to other academic disciplines? I'm going to make it really concrete because, see, you're starting interested. What about the students that aren't starting interested? So I'm going to give an example of something I saw in someone's class. This is not a QuSTEAM member institution, and I intend it as a bad example of what to do. Somebody that has not thought carefully about who their audience is and how to, so I'm not going to name the professor or the institution, but this is very widely available material that hopefully becomes replaced with something that's more accessible. And the example is a player running across a field with a lacrosse stick, and the field is rough and their running is rough. So there's sort of small noise and big noise, and one way they do that is by rocking the lacrosse, that they hold the ball is by rocking the lacrosse stick back and forth. And so that's a bit like dynamical decoupling and is a good metaphor. But how many people know what that means? Unless you got the lacrosse stick in front of them, it's not accessible. And even if you do have the lacrosse stick in front of them, you're not tying to their interests, right? So if you Google just do see what the intensity, Google Trends, the intensity of Google searches on lacrosse, that's a great thing to use in Wisconsin. Do it in Wisconsin.
This is actually a trap that I think many, so just thinking of educators who are just learning how to be educators, this is a common trap where you choose an application that's sort of a non-application, right?
Or skews, you really skewing towards Star Wars is known to skew towards boys. Skewing towards constructive video games is known not to have a gender bias. And depending on the video game, you can even get a positive bias towards women who are underrepresented in STEM. And therefore, on a justice basis, I would argue that's a skew worth making. No matter what specific examples you use, you're not going to hit all your students. So use diverse examples, try to tie it into what you've discovered about your students. Those are the things that I think we need to do to expand the number of women, the number of people of color in quantum. And so I've given one idea about lacrosse, so Russell really mentioned 5 different strategies. So one is inclusive materials, and it's not just about coloring up materials. It's actually about redefining the breadth of interests. A second one is careers and impacts. That's the change the conversation evidence. A third one is building community in your classroom. That's the culturally responsive pedagogy piece, where you let students engage on their areas of expertise first. And another is near-peer mentoring. So for instance, North Carolina A&T has quantum scholars. They took the 30 best students that were interested, and gave them stipends, and they meet with them. They're taking a series of classes. They were already doing VQE, the variational quantum eigensolver, to solve energy levels of a molecule by the end of freshman year. And they meet on Saturdays. They have an industry mentor. They have near-peer mentors. So if you want, it'd be great to find some graduate students or upper undergraduate students who are women and approach them and say, if that's a problem on your campus to get a diverse gender-wise, if that's the demographic you're struggling with, I'd start by recruiting some specific undergraduates and then have them recruit their friends. You can use clubs that skew towards women. It's known having a puppy at a recruiting table it skews more than any other effect I know. So we'll come to your campus and set up the QSTEAM table with interactives and swag. And if you want us to, we'll talk to a local pet store and have a puppy there. That is something they do, and it does change who stops at the table. So I'm not saying, the J in JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, is important. And I appreciate Russell's point that this is really about what works. And because of the workforce and national security issues, we got to reach everybody, because if you recruit diverse people, you get a better product. That's all true. But I also think that there's a justice perspective here, that we need to not inherit the exclusive anti-women, anti-people of color culture from physics, computer science, and electrical engineering. Those are three of the most uncomfortable disciplines. As an undergraduate at MIT, I actually had 2 students stand up in a quantum lecture at the junior level and walk out of the lecture hall because MIT had hired the second woman in the physics department and she was teaching the class. It's unacceptable, and it's not that long ago. And the only way to change it is on purpose with the community. So an example is the Math Alliance, graduate mentorship of math students. People outside of math those professors in physics have never heard of the Math Alliance, and they need to, because it's a great example. And what you do is you don't work with people that don't want to work with you. You're never going to convert the campus that wants to make calculus a prerequisite for their very introductory quantum course. Forget them. They're not trying. Work with the campuses that are ready to recruit a diverse workforce, because that is not only the better thing to do for all kinds of reasons, it's also the right thing to do.
And I appreciate that, because everyone picking your battles, and I'm I'm always picking every battle, so I kind of do want to focus on the fact that you don't need to accept or buy into the justice piece to really buy into the diverse competitive piece. However, man, do I appreciate.
Yeah. And I'm in Iowa, where actually if you have DEI in your job title, you just lost it. It's the political situation makes it a little dicey, because people mishear what you mean, right? When you say justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, now they think that that's something bad. And I guess I had one student. Well, I think I won't tell that on a live stream, but we need to get dialogue going so that people can understand that this is a win-win situation here. By doing things that are good for students who would otherwise feel excluded by what you were going to do, instead, by changing it, you're doing something that's good for all of your students and for the workforce and for the products that come out of the workforce. And nobody's trying to take a job from white men. That's not what's happening here. Yeah.
And so in terms of concrete ways to work together, it sounds like things like hackathons, things like internships for students that are looking for industry experience, summer programs. So if you're if you're out there and wondering, what are some programs that are out there, definitely look up all the offerings that QSTEAM has to offer, and anything that's going on in the greater Chicago Quantum Exchange, as well as I would be remiss if I didn't mention our summer program as well, which, you're welcome. International students also more than welcome to apply for that. We love to have a group from all over the world studying interesting problems. And so in terms of hackathons and industry internships and these sorts of things, I think we're nearly out of our scheduled time for the live stream. If there's any other audience questions, do be sure to get those in so that we can make sure to ask our guests. But so I was hoping that we could also talk a little bit more about, so specifically at these kind of hackathon or let's maybe make this a 2-part question. So one is, hackathons and these more sort of informal learning spaces, and the other would be, internships. So what are some things that make both of these successful in your experience?
with hackathons, I think having diverse, so at the CQE, we are really fortunate to be, well, I mean, it's by design. We engage with industry, the government, national labs, and academic institutions. And the hackathons are really amazing in the diverse people it brings to the table, and that they're focused on projects that are defined by industry professionals. And so, but then at the same time, they're split up. The hackathons are split up into technical portion and business development portions. And so that just really expands the number of people that can be involved and the kinds of problems that you can work on, and really cross-pollination to develop innovative, approaches to
Thank
even,
you. We didn't hit the entrepreneurial bell nearly enough. It's
We should
super
emphasize
important
that.
to
Yes,
incorporate entrepreneurialism into courses.
exactly.
And start out with the mindset that there are problems that people have not identified, let alone thought about the solutions, and you can scale that and impact people at scale, and that we need to teach how to develop, like, just the one day of
The
entrepreneurialism
hackathons
would
are
be
perfect for
huge.
that. Hackathons are perfect for this. And then the entrepreneurial piece is when we are developing this into courses as well. But I think that, like Ben is saying, that really the hackathons are an amazing place to bring all of this together, because it's a place where you're getting all kinds of people coming in from starting point, but then also super experienced experts in the field and everyone in between. And at the same time, so they have to come in, you have to accelerate them, right? And this is a quick thing, so you have to be able to crash course content. So there's quantum education involved. You have to have it. And then there's the fact that you have so for that, we have games, and part of what I think hackathons could really leverage is quantum games, game theory in general, and using that collaborative space to bring these different types of people together to work and think on these types of problems. And then at the same time, having the pitch competition, having the diverse types of problem sets, worked on, all feed into this accelerated. So it's like putting everything in a pressure cooker. And so there's definitely the slow cook, and you can throw it in your crock pot, and that's great. But then you can throw it into your pressure cooker, and it's going to be a different type of meal, right? It's going to be a different type of everything. And so that's what I think these hackathons are great for. Really high intensity engagements that lead to sustained impact over time because of the connections that are made. Not necessarily because of what all happens on that day. I don't think anybody is really like won the Nobel Prize out of a hackathon last I checked, but the reality is they're super helpful. And at bare minimum, even if a technical solution didn't, get presented that no one else has come up with before, you have new connections and you have a new way of approaching these problems that you didn't before. And that's exactly the kind of thing, innovation and that entrepreneurial spirit we need in the space to progress. And then in the classroom, Ben, you want to chime in?
The second half of the question was about the industry mentorships, or
No, I think you were saying push that to a different time.
Well, so if either of you would like to chime in on that, because I mean, obviously, industry partners also have their opinions on what tends to make for successful partnerships in terms of finding good projects for students who are coming in from a undergraduate research opportunity, or even a student, as you mentioned. One thing that I really appreciate about what we do oftentimes, especially with our summer programs, is that no matter where you are in terms of your official credentials, if you're interested to work in problems, by all means, apply and let us know what you're passionate about. And if it's a good fit for something that is a problem that we're also having, then that's a great place to collaborate, sort of no matter what the prior training is, as long as someone is eager to work on something, that usually works out well.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, one of the things QuSTEAM is working to develop is that network, right? The professional network and exactly these kinds of connections. And in large part, we want to model it after this amazingly, fantastically successful program. We're hoping to get renewed at some point, but it's called the KISNet program. It's housed, it started at Harvard kind of, but it's housed at the Chicago Quantum Exchange at the University of Chicago. And what this does is gives a triplet of participants, a graduate student, their PI, and an industry partner or a national lab researcher, funding for a couple years, or whatever it is, a few years, to engage on exactly what you're talking about, a collaboratively defined project that serves exactly that purpose. And the output of this program is that I saw in helping manage this for the couple years when it was going on. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I can only remember of like two, I mean, really, I remember one in particular, but maybe two or three individuals that went on to a postdoctoral fellowship, actually, that were in this program. And there's a lot of individuals that went through this program because they all got amazing opportunities in industry, right? So now you are bringing research and you're cross-pollinating, and that is exactly the kind of thing. And one of them started his own company. Everybody heard of it? It's called QBraid. We were just on it. All right. So Kisnet brings you QBraid at the end of the day, right? That's what you get. So he was working with IBM and he went with Google, and then he was at Dartmouth with JD Whitfield, and then the rest is history. He was like, I want to do this platform, and now here he is in Chicago renting out space downtown. Got too big for the space here in the CQE, and so now they're like renting real expensive space downtown. And so this is how we do it, and we bring more people in that are different, diverse, and include more types of people as much as possible. And at the end of the day, you're going to see a really amazing community that then kicks out more opportunities because people know how to leverage unique, non-traditional opportunities. So that's something that I can do because I'm a unique, non-traditional individual that has that experience. And so I can do things that other people haven't really thought of because, well, I've done this. I've seen this done. I know this will work. And so we bring in new ideas and strengthen our ecosystem.
Yeah, one of my colleagues was lucky enough to visit those QBraid offices recently.
Wow.
Kanav, if you're listening, we'll definitely have to have you on for a live stream as well sometime soon.
It's amazing, amazing company. We're big fans of QBraid, big supporters, and also Wolfram, man. Like I said, it's absolutely essential for me to be online and to be able to move between my notebook and writing it out by hand and showing them and then sending them the notes right afterwards, to being able to just define the states. So, we have our 1-qubit states. Then we define, right, the Hadamard gates and some basic elementary operations. And then for 2-qubit states and our CNOT gate on them. And this just really, the control Z right on this. We need these gates for Grovers. We need these gates as fundamental gates. And so we can really leverage simple tools to do powerful education.
So one related question to that, actually. So as I said, if you're in the audience and have any questions, we're nearing the amount of time that we have, so make sure that you get those in. But one sort of maybe hopefully not too much in the weeds question, but this is something that I'm kind of curious about is, so you were just mentioning in a lot of the examples that we've been talking about use sort of the digital approach to quantum computing. There is some really exciting stuff going on in the analog hardware world too. I'm curious your own just thoughts about for educational purposes. What are some places that you choose to use either gate-based formalism versus talking about analog systems, or what are some of your thoughts there just briefly as we're waiting for our last audience questions to come in?
Yeah, so where we choose, as far as we being QSTEAM, I want to make it clear that we actually aren't making those choices. So it's different at every campus. There are campuses that really emphasize continuous wave, and what we do choose in our materials is to aim for a balance across a wide variety of qubit platforms, as well as a direction in the curriculum. There are people that race towards quantum networking, quantum communications.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that race in an introductory course towards quantum cryptography, quantum sensing. So depending on the application, and you choose the application based on the strengths of your campus, based on the student interest, based on the community that your campus is situated in terms of employers, that's going to, if you're interested in quantum sensing and squeeze states, then the model of a two-state system that's I mean, it's just I don't think that there's one answer to any question in that direction, but it is important that every course introduce a large context across sectors, across disciplines. And what you just mentioned is a great example of how you can create blind spots by not pulling back to the big picture. So so I just want to jump in real quick with some of this time, because what I think we want to answer is that it's essential to have hands-on experience to really get trained in this field. That is a huge barrier right now for inclusion. So it's not a requirement. Just like it's wonderful if a student has linear algebra, if they take an abstract algebra, if you're taking a class on operator algebra, even, hey, awesome, then we can really start talking, right? So that's all wonderful and that's great, but it's not necessary. As I think what we're trying to say is that you can go. We work with, we meet people where they're at, and so institutions that don't have the ability to get QTools equipment or remotely access the QTools equipment to one of our partners that we have right now, like one only at UChicago. But what we're doing at QSTEAM is applying for grants, and we're working with the University of Illinois Chicago and Wilbur Wright, University of Puerto Rico, MIOS, to get more equipment, QTools equipment, which is remotely accessible. So we do have course 4 in our minor that Bennet had showed, and that is a lab course. So what we mean by minor as well, let me rephrase, give context. We are not a accredited body institution, so we don't give degrees and we don't have exactly a minor. What we do have is curriculum, and we have, again, a network and partners and founding members at institutions that are creating these programs within their own institution. Chicago State is developing and running through curriculum, committees, curriculum and things that we're developing, and obviously OSU has done this, other places, and so U of I, University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. So this is the process. So the first process is to get the curriculum, test it out, get it better, have institutions adopt it, pilot it, and then apply for permanent course status and permanent minor, program implementation. And so we're in that whole process of getting everyone, engaged and getting these minors stood up. As a part of the minor structure is that it starts at the 0th level, if you will, where community colleges are engaged, and you can do the first 4 core courses at a community college. And so one of the ways that we're looking to do this with Wilbur Wright is establish remote equipment with University of Illinois Chicago that they won money for, and they've already purchased, and they're waiting for the equipment from QTools right now. And so they're setting up a remotely accessible lab at the University of Illinois Chicago, and Wilbur Wright and other places. And so we want to get more equipment that would then be at Chicago State and Wilbur Wright to then broaden access and provide more nodes that other institutions can then access remotely, including University of Puerto Rico. And so we want to build this scaling effect so that people do have access to real hands-on equipment, even if they're accessing it remotely and tweaking the motor on the stage. It's still a real experiment they're running. They're still getting the results, real results. But we want to minimize access to this right now, and we're not relying on only access to that for our program to succeed. So we're looking at lower cost equipment, getting classical analogs in the hands of students, even remotely, and then dial in to do the more sophisticated single photon experiments. And these are things that play across, like Ben was saying, all fields. So quantum optics, we use it for quantum computing, quantum sensing, and so there's communication networks. And so QTools platform is a really wonderful hands-on platform to really jump off of and connect any of the fields.
So this is a great point that you bring up, which is that when we're talking about hands-on experience, whether you're giving instructions to the equipment from like the other side of one door from the clean room, or the next building over on the same campus, or actually from an entirely different geographic location, that's basically the same process. And so having now, and there's economic challenges with making some of this very specialized hardware physically present at every location where you might want it. So this new way of allowing people to get actual access to experimental hardware, while the experimental hardware might not be physically located where they are, is a really exciting thing that, you know, I sometimes wonder, you know, what courses I took would have been like, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, if that had been a part of the paradigm that now, you know, is something which I find really personally exciting.
I mean, my dream would be in the future that phones and like Oculus type virtual reality setups become so ubiquitous that computers are, you know, no longer exactly required, and you're getting everything off of servers for the most
Go
anything
back to a terminal model.
right? And then yeah, right. And we can have really interactive digital experiences where you're able to manipulate the experiments in a more analog, you know, human interaction interface level, but you're still having this so you can train people that they can do things in person, but at the same time have the effect we were just talking about, John. I mean, that would be a dream, right?
Yeah, to spell out his point E there, you know, how can we make these very expensive? I mean, an SPDC setup is expensive just itself, and then if you want to do anything with it, you need to tech. I mean, it can be pricey. So
Including
moving
Chicago State, I brought a SPD setup, right? And
I know. Yeah, so we have a number of different solutions for that, and Russell mentioned all of them, but I think it's a really important point to enumerate them and to mention that we don't actually know how important it is to provide, you know, the gold standard of 2 students on or 3 students on a piece of equipment that they have right in front of them with on-site instruction. So, you know, is it as valuable to have a piece of equipment that rotates among campuses? I have a Quantum coffer here, which that's an expensive piece of equipment. I just retrieved it from one campus and then bringing it to another campus, providing a training, you know, so rotating equipment, a quantum trailer, that's one option. Sharing equipment in a different way, but where the equipment doesn't move, is another option. A hub and spoke, where maybe the faculty come at first to the central research university or larger institution, and then they're followed later by students. So that's another model. Another model is to just completely virtualize it, like VQuil that I posted in the chat there. There is no physical thing anywhere. It's a complete mathematical simulation. And there are things in that category like Sequence is a tool for simulating quantum communication that we've worked with a team at Argonne National Lab to work into a curriculum module. Another is to have physical equipment, but access it remotely, like Octant from Inflection. We've worked with them to provide time on that quantum computer to institutions that want to use it. Another is to virtualize the experience more than, you know, command line code or nice visualizations, but to have the real equipment on webcam and that you schedule a time, kind of like the Intel FPGA network. We have that. We have entanglement demonstrations you can reserve remote desktop time on, and they're based at the University of Chicago. There's also you know, a virtual presence that Russell alluded to there of stereoscopic pictures in a physical environment and an experience as though you're there, maybe even haptically, you know, some very futuristic implementation. So and then there are strategies that blend those, of course, but I want to mention how important it is, you know, that we solve that problem in particular and research the effectiveness of our solutions, because ultimately, you know, I don't know, we're at time, so I'm trying to provide my last words anyway.
Sure.
We have a huge problem internationally as a species. How do we leverage this, as well as nationally? How do we not get our butt handed to us on a silver platter? And the key problem of that is the bottleneck in the workforce. In the United States, that is the limiting factor. That is the throttle, is the workforce. And the way to solve that is by broadening participation, by broadly implementing evidence-based instruction across diverse campuses. And that if you want to solve that the only way to do so is by working together across departments, across institutions, across industry, academia, and government and nonprofits, and being more open and collaborative than competitive IP environments are normally aiming to do, because to support your private IP, you need a workforce, and companies are joining QuSTEAM because they're finding, hey, if we actually support use of our product, I mean, that's what everybody wants to do. by sharing some of the central concepts that maybe we were more protected around even in a curriculum module, and passing that through QuSTEAM to diverse campuses, providing an internship position for a QuSTEAM student. You know, it's going to take engagement between academia and industry, and government's going to have to help, because we cannot wait for the market to drive it.
And putting a specific, so you mentioned the octant service for making quantum matter from inflection. So that, as a specific example, you know, that's one of the tools that, you know, if you're someone out there who's interested in doing this research on, you know, how effective is the pedagogy that we can develop by, let's say, creating a theoretical model of the system, running it on the actual hardware through that service, let's say, and then you know, seeing, okay, did we get the learning outcomes that we were able for? Do please you know, reach out. I'm sure anyone here on this live stream would be more than happy to help try to facilitate your work and be potential collaborators on that. So, you know, for any of these questions that you mentioned, there is a lot of not only technical but also pedagogical work to do to figure out, okay, let's make sure that what we think is going to be effective in this realm is as effective as what our prior research would lead us to believe.
There it is.
And my last word I really want is just a plea with the community, exactly the kind you were saying, but to really make a plea. Treat this as a research problem. This is a social problem. This is a bigger problem. We're trying to navigate not a well-defined problem. I understand that. But treat it like a research problem. Treat it like it's that important as well. And you know, don't just give up on a few failed, if you will, or things that didn't go the way you thought they would, and oh well, this won't work, or it's just too much effort. It is a lot of effort, believe me. If anybody can understand and connect and relate to anybody who feels like this is just too hard, every day I feel like that sometimes, you know, I mean, on some level at some point. But I believe that if we come together, we bring everyone from every field, from every walk of life together, we can put our heads together and really make progress here in a way that we couldn't have thought of before. And so treat it seriously, take this and commit to it, and give your all to this space, because this is the future, right? It's not just the future for our careers, it's the future for this country. It's the future for our kids. Look at what we're using right now. We're using internet and we're using computers. When did this start? When did we develop these things, right? But now it's important. So if we want our kids and their kids' kids to have the best and have the opportunity to choose for themselves the best life, we have to start now. We have to invest now. Thank you.
And yeah, so as we get to the end of the time our speakers probably have, thanks so much for joining us. I'll take the prerogative here to inject one last audience comment, which was that you know, they love the ability of platforms like QBraid for easy interaction with GPUs. They love the ability of using Mathematica to do symbolic calculus. And so, you know, seeing a variety of these tools come together in interesting ways is something that our audience apparently likes, and so we like it too. So thank you for joining us, and to both of our speakers, Russell and Bennett, thank you so much for being here. And it was a real pleasure talking to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Thank you. Everybody who's taking the time to watch this later or come now, thanks for the questions, and feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Yeah, please engage.